What is a Russia? If you would have asked this question to Winston Churchill, he'd say it is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma, which is a really profound way of admitting he had no idea what they were doing in there. But if you travel back in time and ask the same question from Russians just a few years apart, you'll get some wildly different answers. Back in the old days, the Rus were pagans doing pagan things. This dude Vladimir shows up and tells everybody they're done being pagan, they're gonna catch up to Europe and convert to Christianity, and suddenly, they're a bunch of Byzantine Empire wannabes. Fast forward a few hundred years, the Mongols show up and say, "Nice country you got there." So I guess they're Central Asians now. Then Ivan III gets Russia out of that situationship and tells everyone they're gonna catch up to Europe. It takes 3 generations, and as soon as they're done, Ivan the Terrible bumps his son right on the noggin, the royal dynasty dies out, Russia plunges into 15 years of civil war, a third of their population starves to death, and Poland occupies the Kremlin. By the time anyone has a minute to look around at Europe again, they realize every nation with a boat is sailing around the world stealing spices and getting filthy rich. Russia wants in on this trade, but there's a problem. Russia has a huge empire, and they forgot to unlandlock themselves. Their only port is Arkhangelsk, which is so far north the ocean's not even liquid half the year, which makes putting boats there really hard. When Alexei I becomes Tsar in 1645, he's got one goal: get some warm water. He's got 2 options: fight the Swedes to the Baltic Sea or fight the Ottomans to the Black Sea. The Ottomans have a massive army and a powerful navy, and Sweden had a massive navy and a powerful army. But Sweden's a little busy fighting Denmark, so YOLO. The Russians show up with tactics from 2 centuries ago. The Swedes show up hot off the 30 Years' War, ready to show Russia everything they just learned about efficiently killing people. Alexei watches his army get demolished and has a moment of realization. The only armies that can beat Europe are European. He gets to work. He creates Western-style units with Western equipment and proper artillery units, and hires foreign officers and specialists to train them. He sets up a cozy new neighborhood for them in the outskirts of Moscow and calls it the German Quarter. Not because it's exclusively German, but it sounds sexier that way. A whole neighborhood of Europeans training Russian troops in the art of kicking ass. Few turns go by and Russia's got something resembling a modern army. Not Western European level just yet, but good enough to take it out for a test drive in Poland and steal their cities. The soldiers were in fighting order, but the officers still got their jobs based on their family's ancestry instead of whether they were any good at their jobs. Russia's shiny new army is only one aristocratic pissing match away from disaster, so Alexei's son Fyodor abolishes the whole system and replaces it with something that actually resembles meritocracy. He got a system based on performance, not whatever was lying around, which is generally a very useful approach, and one I've been trying to work into my own habits. And since we are kicking off 2026, if you want to upgrade your own foundation this year, you should check out today's sponsor, AG1.
AG1 is a daily health drink that supports my immune health. 1 scoop in the morning with cold water gives you 75 plus vitamins, minerals, and probiotics, supporting your energy levels without the afternoon crash. It replenishes commonly underconsumed daily micronutrients, which can give you peace of mind when your diet isn't perfect. In an industry where not everyone invests into research, AG1 is continuously investing in gold standard clinical trials and rigorously tests their formula for impurities, so you can be confident you're always getting the industry's best. I added AG1 to my morning routine about 3 weeks ago. I fill up my bottle while I'm brushing my teeth right before breakfast, and honestly, since I started drinking it, I have been feeling really good. AG1 replaces the need for a multivitamin, probiotics, and more for less than $3 a day with a subscription. Head to drinkag1.com/historyabridged to get 3 free AG1 travel packs, 3 free AGZ travel packs, plus free vitamin D3 plus K2 and an AG1 welcome kit with your first subscription order. Thanks to AG1 for sponsoring today's video.
The higher-ranking nobility is furious at the reforms, but if they were competent enough to stage a rebellion, they would still be in the army. Fyodor kicks the bucket in 1682 at just 20 years old and without an heir, and Russia's got a succession crisis. Ivan V is technically next in line for the throne, but he's mentally impaired and almost blind, which is not ideal for running a country still trying to figure out how muskets work. The next person on the list is his half-brother Peter, who is 10 years old, which is also not ideal. Ultimately, the nobles, or boyars as we call them in Russia, come to their senses and decide that which child should be given the power of life and death over them is not a worthy cause to start murdering each other over. At least not twice. You gotta try it at least once. Ivan and Peter are appointed as co-czars, with their sister Sophia acting as their regent, for obvious reasons. Your Majesty, I humbly request permission to expand my estate. I want bananas. What? What he means is, yes, the state expansion is approved, but taxes will increase accordingly. Oh, of course, Your Majesty. Thank you. Peter is still a bit shaken by watching his friends and relatives get killed from that first time the boyars tried to have a go at it. So since he's not running the country, he goes to live with his mother at a little village on the outskirts of Moscow called Preobrazhenskoye, right next to the German quarter. There, he meets a lot of smart people who teach him a lot of smart things like marching formation and how a functional European military works, and shipbuilding, a surprise tool that will help him later. He's having the time of his life until a little birdie told me your sister's planning to overthrow you.
She's doing what? Wait. You are the little birdie.
But before Peter reaches the Kremlin, his loyal nobles and troops have already crushed the rebellion. And at just 17 years old, Peter is tasked with officially leading Russia. Ivan is still technically co-czar. Your Majesty, we need to do something about our treasury. But his stance on policy hadn't really changed. And now it's all up to Peter to get some goddamn warm water. Deciding that the Swedes are still a little too scary, Peter picks a fight with the Ottomans. He's got a modernized military now thanks to his dad, and he's not scared to use it. He's going to take over the fortress of Azov and finally secure a route to the Black Sea. His forces besiege the fortress, perfectly cutting off every land approach. The plan is a success, except for one tiny detail. The fort is on water.
Deploy the navy.
Your Majesty, we don't have a real navy, no warm water, yeah? Bit of a chicken and egg problem there. The Russians sit there at Azov for 4 months, watching Ottoman ships sail right past them and resupplying the fortress. If Russia's ever gonna get their warm water, they're gonna have to take a gamble. And then Peter remembers the German quarter, shipbuilding, a surprise tool that will help him later. Peter hires shipwrights from across Europe and starts construction on Russia's first real flotilla. And after months of personally watching other people do back-breaking work and an endless supply of serf labor, Peter builds 30 galleys in a single winter. If this campaign goes badly, these ships can't return to harbor easily, or at all if they retreat and it's frozen solid. But this is no time to think about contingencies. It's time to think about how good it's going to feel to watch Ottoman faces when Russia shows up with 30 ships. Peter launches the Second Azov campaign in 1696, this time with boats. Again, the army secures the fortress by land, and yes, by Jove, he's done it! For the first time in history, the Russians have access to warm water. And all it took was centuries of trying and one czar who actually knew how boats work. Peter looks at what a little westernization did for Russia and realizes he has only scratched the surface of how hard he can bully the Ottomans. He needs to study the Europeans. He needs to study them personally. He travels under the alias Pyotr Mikhailov. He is a 6'8" Russian man with a heavy accent, but the Europeans play along anyway. After Russia's victory at Azov, European powers are suddenly very interested in being on Peter's good side. The English and the Dutch both open all their technological advancements to him.
What does this do?
That's my lunch, Your Majesty.
Majesty? Where?
But Peter's got a second item on his agenda. You know, without the liqueur, it's not really ganache, but don't tell Mustafa.
Would you be interested in a Christian alliance against the Ottomans?
I mean, that's what Europeans do, isn't it? Unite against the enemy of Christ? And give Russia all their warm water? What exactly did you say your name was?
Pyotr Mikhailov, simple Russian carpenter.
With an interest in international diplomacy.
I've been known to dabble.
Louis! This ganache is the best. What the hell is he wearing?
Deus Vult!
Come on, man, it's 1698! So he doesn't come away with his alliance against the Ottomans, but he can still put everything he learned in Europe to use.
What did I learn again? Yes, the hard labor. Shave it, Your Majesty. The beard. Shave it.
But Your Majesty, beards are a sign of...
Europe doesn't have beards. We're European now. Shave.
Now that item 1 on the agenda is done, Peter shifts focus to item 2, the Baltic Sea. He's got the Black Sea, but the Ottomans control the only passage to the Mediterranean. The Baltic is a direct route to Western Europe, and it's controlled by Sweden, who Peter has been itching to rematch since his dad got embarrassed all those years ago. So in 1700, Peter invades Sweden. The Swedes use their extensive resume of kicking Russia's ass to good use and proceed to do it again. Peter realizes to win a European war, he needs European-level funding, so he gets creative with taxes. Remember how he hated beards? The Russians really wanted to keep them, so Peter lets them, as long as they pay the beard tax. He also monopolizes the salt industry and jacks up prices. That may have been more of a deciding factor. With all that money, he revamps his army and invades Sweden again. This time, the Russians capture the Swedish fortress of Nien, planting Russia's flag on the Baltic coastline for the first time in history. Peter looks out at the swampy, mosquito-infested land he just conquered and thinks,
This will be my Versailles.
He lays the foundation for St. Petersburg, his shiny new European port city made with the latest European standards, and then he forces the boyars to build mansions in St. Petersburg. If they can adapt to Russia's new look, Peter has a new job for them to take, and if they can't, hey, Peter's got a nice cushy retirement waiting for them in the countryside, far away from politics. Then he sets up the secret police. Can't have a good Russian empire without secret police, who make sure that no boyars try to accidentally overthrow Peter while he's busy building shipyards or partying with Europeans. But of course, no good deed goes unpunished. Charles XII of Sweden, the new teenage king, marches into Russia for revenge with the confidence of a man who's never lost a battle. Peter thinks he's finally patched every hole with his modern army and Western tactics, but the Swedish invasion reveals one more glaring weakness. Logistics. You can have all the rifles in the world, but if your gunpowder takes 9 months to arrive by mud road, all you can do is swing them like swords. So Peter pulls another page from the Western playbook and invents gubernias, giant administrative regions with ex-boyar governors who are theoretically competent at running them. While all that's going on, the Swedish army is still invading, so Peter burns everything in Russia to the ground. By the time the Swedes reach Poltava in 1709, they are exhausted and starving, and Peter's army absolutely annihilates one of the strongest armies in Europe. Peter just took Sweden's place as a great power. And then he introduces the governing Senate, professional ministries, and a bunch of other boring bureaucratic stuff that ensure Russia won't collapse the second he dies. Which might have been very helpful if he hadn't let his only surviving son die in prison, and sent Russia into yet more decades of political instability and succession crisis. The end.